Okay, so the next thing that we're going to learn about is an HTML input element. The HTML input element has many different variations, and it's used. The basic use is so that the web people who go to your website can put in their information and you can get it. Okay, so we're gonna go back to our code and we're gonna delete this. Okay, so let's, instead of making it making the title student list, let's make it what's your name? Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is make the input element. Okay, so the input element is simple. We're just gonna write input and then close it. Okay, just like the image tag or the a tag, or just like the image tag, the input element doesn't have any content inside of it. Okay, so we're gonna save, and then we're gonna go back, and then we're gonna refresh our page. So now look, now we have a text box in our page. You can write anything you want in it, but it's very basic. Okay, so one thing that we're going to do now is we're going to add another attribute into the input tag. The way that you make all the different variations for an input tag is that you change the attribute. It has many different attributes. Okay, so one attribute that we're going to add is the placeholder attribute. Okay, so the placeholder attribute will have a piece of text inside of it. For example, like a gray text that will disappear once you start typing. So you might have seen a placeholder. You can see placeholders in many different places. So for example, you see right here it says search Google or type a URL, and then when we click it or start typing, it will disappear. So now if we go back and then change the placeholder, we're going to write just name. Okay, so because we already have the title at the top that says what's your name, the input will be used, the input's placeholder will be used so that the users know where they're supposed to type their name. For example, if you have multiple input text boxes, they might not know where you're supposed to, which one you're supposed to use to type your name. Okay, so we save it, and then we're gonna refresh our page, and now we have a gray text that says name. So what happens when I click it and then type? It disappears. Okay, so let's say we want to only accept instead of text, we only want to accept numbers. Okay, so in order to do that, we have to add another attribute into the input tag called type. Okay, so we're going to put in type, and then you see there are multiple different types inside the VS Code text completion. So this time we're only going to use number. Okay, so now let's say how old are you instead of what's your name as the question. How old are you? And then instead of the placeholder name, we're going to write age. Okay, now we're going to save, and then we're going to go back. Now let me refresh it. Now it says how old are you and asks for your age. Now notice right here, it has two little arrows now, right? So you can increase the age or decrease it as much as you want. You can also type in any number you want. But look what happens when I try to type in a number. You see nothing happens? Nothing happens. I'm trying to type in text right now, but nothing happens. But when I try to type in a number, it does work. Okay? So now let's go back and try some different types. Okay? So let's say you want to put in a password. Let's say you're making a and then they're supposed to put in their username and their password. The way that you can make sure that their password isn't viewed by somebody behind them is make a type that is a password. Okay? So let's say what is your password? In the question, and then we're going to write password in the placeholder. Now, for the type, we're just going to write password. Okay? Now if we go back and then refresh our page, now the text box looks normal, but right when we try to type into it, you see it turns into dots. Okay? When I try to type numbers into it, oh, let me delete this. When I try to type numbers into it, it works too, but they're all dots, so that somebody cannot see what you're typing. Okay? So there are also many different types. So just like you guys saw before, you see there's button, checkbox, color, date, date time. So you see date will only let you put in a date, and then date time local only lets you put in an easier to write date, because date time is only a date that the computer, and then date time local is a date that you that says, for example, September 23. And then an email, only in an email inside the email format. And then let me go back. I accidentally clicked it. And then file lets you upload a file. Hidden lets you hide the input. And then and so on and so on. So now let me go back to the presentation. And now let's go on to HTML forms. So now you have an input, but let's say you have multiple inputs and you need a container for those inputs. You can use a div, but the better way is to use an HTML form. An HTML form is a specifically created element so your browser can recognize that it contains multiple different fields that the user is supposed to type in and then submit. Okay, so we're gonna try making a form right now. So let's say we make a form, and then inside of that form, let's write a title that says, on top of the form actually, that says login. So the first thing that you need to log in is a username, right? So instead of using an actual, before we actually write the input, we're going to use another element called a label. Okay? The label is basically what the name says. It's supposed to contain a small amount of text before your input. Okay? So let's say it says username. Then under the label, we're going to create our input. And then, because we can't just use h1 or title elements for every single label because they're going to be too big and they take up too much space. So now we're going to put an input, and then we're going to make the placeholder username. And then make sure the type is text. You can also specify that it's text. This is a good practice. But if you leave it, it will still be the default will be a text input. Okay. Now we're gonna copy and paste this, and then instead of username, we're gonna replace it with password. And then we're gonna replace this placeholder with password too. Okay. Now, if we go back right here and then refresh, now you see that there's two elements right here that say username and password, right? So we also need a submit button. Okay. So in order to do that, we can use the button element. Okay. So the button element, just like in English, is just button, and then the name will be login. The text inside of it will say login. Okay. Now let me go back. Now let me try typing some words. Test. And if I click the button, you see now what happens when I click the button. Look, I'll show you guys again. I think I did it too fast. Test, and then inside the password. Oh, and for the password, we have to make the type password as well. Let me refresh the page. Now we're gonna write test and then test. So look what happens when I click it. Because it's a form, right when I click the button, the page automatically. Oh, I think I have to make the button submittable. Now if I refresh and then try typing test, and I click enter, I think it doesn't work, but I'll okay. Okay, so we have to make the input and then change the type to submit. Okay, sorry guys, I think I messed up. So now, if we go back and then type test, and then let's take this text out because it's a one element type of element. We're gonna write test, and then click submit. So right now it doesn't do anything because we're not using JavaScript, but if we write test and then click submit, and then if it has any JavaScript behind it that tells it what to do, it will be able to take your content, and then it will immediately take out the text from the inputs. It will make them empty, then it will take you to another page. And then at that time, your browser will immediately sense that you submitted text, and then it will ask you if you want to save your password for next time. And then you can click save or never. And then when you come back to the website, if you're logged out, it will let you log back in again. Okay? So, now, we're going to go back to the presentation and look at some other elements we can use. Okay? So, we already used the label element and the input element. So, another element we can use is the text area element. I'm just going to quickly show you guys what that element does. Okay? So, the text area element is an element that lets you write a lot of text in one place. Like you may have noticed, the input element is just a small element that doesn't take a lot of, it's not supposed to take like paragraphs of text. But the text area element is made to. Okay? So if I just write text area over here, and then let's say I write a label that says, enter your essay. Then if I go back to our website and refresh, you see now we have a text area element, and it has a little, in this little corner over here, you can drag it and then make it as big as you want or as small as you want. Later you can also edit it so that it's a fixed size, but the default lets you change the size of it so you can write as much text as you want. Okay? So now if we go back to our presentation, we have another element that says field set. Okay? So a field set is just like the div element. It's just supposed to contain different elements inside of your form. Okay? So over here, let's say we have one section for your essay, and then if I go back and then copy my login page, now we have one section for your element, and another top for your essay, and then we're gonna make another field set, and then inside we'll have another section for your login. Okay? So now if I save this, you see now the field set, it already has its own border, and it separates the two form areas. Okay, just like a div, but the div doesn't change how it looks. Okay. So we also have the select element. Okay, the select element and the option element. So the select element is just like a drop-down element. Okay, so if you have multiple questions you want to ask the user, or if you have a question that you have multiple answers for it, but it only if you have multiple answers for one question, but a fixed number of them, you can use the select element. So first we're going to write select, and then just like a table, inside of the select element, it also has different options. Okay, so we're going to write option, and then let's say the question we're going to ask is, let's say, what type of car is your favorite? Okay? What type of car is your favorite? Okay, so let's just say a truck for one of the options, and we're going to make another option element, and then let's say a SUV. Then we're going to make another element, and then we're going to say a bus, and then we're going to change this to what type of vehicle is your favorite. Okay, so now if we go back and refresh the page, you see we have a question that says what type of vehicle is your favorite. Actually, I made a mistake. I should have used the label element so that it's not very big. Now if you refresh, it says what type of vehicle is your favorite right here. So you can choose, it automatically chooses the first option, but I can change it to SUV, bus, or back to truck. Okay? You can also use opt groups. Okay? Opt groups are just like with the field set or the div. It contains different option elements. Okay? It's made specifically for that. So let's say right here, if we had asked a more specific question, like say what type of car is your favorite, and then let's say right here, opt group, we'll have, for example, in the trucks category, in the trucks category we'll write Chevy or Ford. And then the same thing in the SUV category. Opt group, we can write instead of just the SUV title, we write Honda or Toyota. Okay, so these are all card types. So now if I go back and then I refresh the page, now we have multiple different types of categories separated by an object group. Okay, you see there's a little space between them now? Okay, so now if we go back to our page, we already finished it. There was also a button at the end, but I already showed you guys a button. I can show you guys again. Instead of over here at the end of our form, we can write button, and then instead of login for the name of the button, for the text inside the button, we're just going to write submit your answers. Okay, so and then if we go back and then refresh, you can see that the button says submit your answers. Okay, so that was HTML forms. I'm going to stop the recording now. If you guys have any questions, I'll take them.